Hey, welcome back. If you're watching this right now, or more likely, if you've already closed your eyes and you're just listening, then you already know what tonight is about. Tonight, we are not doing anything stressful. We are not going to talk about anything that requires you to think too hard. We are going to settle in together, and for the next couple of hours, I am going to tell you about a man. A very specific man. A large, round, wonderfully catastrophic man who lives in a fictional Rhode Island town called Quahog, and who has spent his entire animated existence finding new and increasingly spectacular ways to make everything around him worse. His name is Peter Griffin. You know him. You've always known him. He sits in that brown recliner. He drinks Pawtucket Patriot Ale. He laughs at his own jokes with that particular wheezing cackle that sounds like a rusty gate being opened by someone who is also very pleased about it. He lives at 31 Spooner Street with his wife Lois, his kids Meg, Chris and Stewie, and his dog Brian, who is somehow the most emotionally functional member of the household and is also a talking dog that drinks martinis, which tells you a great deal about the household in question. Family Guy first aired on January 31st, 1999 on Fox. That means Peter Griffin has been having a terrible time for well over 2 decades now. He has been fired, injured, humiliated, crushed, electrocuted, stranded, frozen, cloned, replaced, outsmarted by an infant, and kicked into at least one foreign country. He has gone to space, to prison, to the bottom of the ocean, and to the inside of a whale. And in every single case, he has emerged from the experience completely unchanged and ready to do it again. Tonight we are going to go through all of it, slowly, gently. At the pace of a bedtime story told by someone who finds Peter's misfortune to be one of the most consistently comforting things on television. Because here is the thing about Peter Griffin that nobody says out loud, but everyone understands. Nothing that happens to him ever really sticks. The world resets, the credits roll, and he is back on that couch by next Sunday, beer in hand, completely untroubled by the events of the previous week. There is something deeply soothing about that, if you think about it. A man who falls down and always gets up. A town that repairs itself between episodes. A family that, despite everything, keeps showing up at the dinner table together. So let your shoulders drop. Let your breathing slow down. You don't have to watch a single second of this. Just listen. Let the voice fill the room, and let Peter Griffin's extraordinary capacity for suffering carry you somewhere warm and quiet. We are going to start at the very beginning, with the moment that, more than any other moment in the show's history, tells you exactly who Peter Griffin is and exactly what is in store for him. We are going to start with the knee. There is an episode in season 2 of Family Guy called Wasted Talent. The plot, in the broadest possible strokes, involves Peter discovering that Pawtucket Patriot Ale, the beer that he has been loyally and enthusiastically consuming for his entire adult life, has hidden a silver scroll underneath select bottle caps, a golden ticket arrangement where the lucky winners get a tour of the Pawtucket Patriot Brewery and a chance at a grand prize. Peter wants this. He wants this in the way that Peter wants most things, which is to say, completely and without any proportionality whatsoever. He begins drinking with the kind of focused intensity that most people reserve for job interviews or medical procedures. He goes through bottle after bottle, he checks cap after cap, and then, in the grand tradition of things that happen to people who want something very badly, the scroll appears. He finds it. And this is where the story, which could have proceeded in any number of directions, takes a turn that nobody quite expected and that the show would spend the next 20 plus years calling back to. Peter Griffin runs home. But this is not an unusual thing for a person to do when they receive exciting news. You want to share it. You want to get back to the people you love and show them what you found. The impulse is completely natural. And Peter, for all his considerable flaws, is a man who genuinely loves his family in his own chaotic, frequently disastrous way. He wants to bring the good news home. He is genuinely, unguardedly excited in the way that only Peter Griffin can be excited, which is to say loudly and without any awareness of his surroundings. He runs down the street, he runs up the path to 31 Spooner Street, and then, right there on the front walkway of his own house, with the door in sight and the prize in his hand, and victory practically close enough to taste, Peter Griffin trips. He goes down, he grabs his knee, and then comes the sound that has haunted the memories of everyone who has ever watched this show and stubbed their own toe in a quiet room. That sharp hissing intake of breath, followed by the slow, controlled exhale of a man who has encountered a pain so specific and so immediate that his entire nervous system has temporarily been redirected toward processing it. He does this for a long time. Not a cartoon quick second of comedic anguish. Not a brief visual gag that gets immediately resolved. He sits there on his own front path, cradling his knee, making this sound over and over again, rocking slightly, completely absorbed in the experience of having hurt his knee, while the scroll sits in his hand and the front door remains unopened approximately 8 feet away. The show lets this breathe, and breathe, and breathe. 30 seconds, give or take, of Peter Griffin sitting on his front path going, shiss, and then shiss again. And what makes it funny? What makes it the kind of funny that stays with you and attaches itself to every similar injury you have in your own life from that point forward, is that there is nothing wrong with Peter that could not be immediately resolved by simply standing up and going inside. The knee is fine. He is fine. He just needs to get up. He does not get up for a very long time. There is a kind of honesty in this that the show rarely gets credit for, because that is what hurting your knee actually feels like, isn't it? That specific combination of surprise and indignity, and the weird way that knee pain makes you feel like you need to just sit with it for a minute before you can do anything else. Peter Griffin is not performing his suffering. He is having it, fully, completely, without any rush to move past it and get on with the plot. The world can wait. The knee must be acknowledged. This became one of the most famous running gags in the history of the show. From that episode forward, anytime a character in Family Guy hurts their knee, they do the same thing. The same sharp inhale, the same slow exhale, the same rocking. It became a language, a shared vocabulary of pain, a shorthand for the specific awfulness of that particular injury that the whole audience understood, because they had all watched Peter sit on his front path and live through it in real time. But here is what is easy to miss if you're thinking about this as just a joke about a funny sound. The knee gag is not just funny because of the noise. It is funny because of what it tells you about Peter Griffin as a person. He is not stoic. He is not the kind of character who grits his teeth and pushes through. When something hurts Peter Griffin experiences it. He does not compartmentalize. He does not suppress. He sits down right where he is and makes the appropriate sounds until the appropriate amount of time has passed, and he feels ready to proceed. In a world that often prizes the ability to push through discomfort with your jaw clenched and your feelings swallowed, there is something almost admirable about a man who will simply sit on his front path and go for half a minute because his knee hurts. He found the scroll. He got the tour. He got the prize. The knee healed, as knees do. And somewhere in Quahog, Rhode Island, the front path at 31 Spooner Street waited patiently for the next time. Let your body settle a little further into where you are right now. Relax your jaw. Unclench anything that has been clenched without you noticing. You are doing fine. There is nowhere you need to be. We're going to keep going, because Peter's relationship with the physical world is only just getting started, and the next story involves his own staircase, which you would think would be a safer proposition than the front path, but is, as it turns out, considerably more dangerous. In Season 10 of Family Guy, there is an episode called The Blind Side, and at the centre of it is one of the most pure and simple comedy premises the show ever deployed. Lois replaces the stairs. That is the whole setup. Stewie gets a splinter from the old staircase. Lois decides this warrants a full replacement, and she installs new stairs in the Griffin house. The new stairs have a slightly smoother, slightly slicker surface than the old ones, and what started as a response to one small splinter proceeds to undo Peter Griffin completely. You need to understand something about Peter's relationship with his environment. He is not a man who adapts well to change. The world for Peter is a set of conditions that he has learned to navigate over a long period of time through repetition rather than understanding. He doesn't know why certain things work. He just knows that they do, and he has arranged his life around the assumption that they will continue to work in exactly the way they always have. The old stairs worked. His feet knew the old stairs. His body had an arrangement with the old stairs that went back years, an unconscious muscle memory understanding of exactly how much friction there was, exactly where to put his weight, exactly how to descend from the second floor of his own house without incident. The new stairs violate all of this. The first fall happens early in the episode, and it is the kind of fall that is almost gentle in its completeness. Peter steps onto the top stair, his foot slides, and he goes down in a way that manages to hit every step on the way. He lands at the bottom. He lies there for a moment in that particular position that is universal to the experience of falling downstairs, legs slightly elevated, arms where they ended up rather than where you would have chosen to put them. He's staring at the ceiling with the specific expression of a person processing what just happened to them. He gets up. He goes about his day. He tries the stairs again. He falls again. This continues. What makes the bit work, what makes it more than just a repeated physical gag, is the escalation. Peter does not keep falling the same way. Each attempt involves a new theory about how to solve the problem. He tries holding the railing. He falls while holding the railing, which is somehow worse because now his hand is involved in the chaos. He tries going sideways, one step at a time. He falls sideways. He tries sitting down and going step by step on his backside, which works for about 3 steps before momentum takes over, and the result is more or less identical to the previous attempts. He invents solutions with the committed creativity of a man who absolutely refuses to consider that the simplest solution, which is to simply be more careful and go slowly, might be the answer. Peter Griffin has never in his life approached a problem with the thought that slowing down might help, and he is not going to start now. At some point he attempts to turn the stairs into a makeshift water slide. The logic here is that if slipperiness is the problem, he can turn slipperiness into a feature rather than a bug. You can probably imagine how this goes. You are correct. Eventually, at the far end of the episode, having tried every possible approach and failed at all of them, Peter simply refuses to use the stairs. He confines himself to the upper floor of his own house. He is not going to solve the stair problem. He is not going to adapt to the stair problem. He is going to wait the stair problem out from a position of elevated safety and complete self-imposed exile from the ground floor of his own home. Lois, to her credit, is not immediately sympathetic. There is a beautiful piece of information buried in this episode, which is that the new stairs are not actually more dangerous than the old stairs by any objective measure. They are slightly smoother, yes, but they are not ice. They are not a ski slope. Dozens of people navigate stairs like these every day in homes all over the world without any particular incident. The stairs are fine. Peter's relationship with physics is the variable that has changed, and he cannot see this. He cannot see that the problem is not the stairs, but his own failure to update his understanding of them. He has decided the stairs are wrong, and he is going to maintain that position from the second floor indefinitely. This is, in its way, a perfect encapsulation of Peter Griffin as a character. The world is allowed to remain reasonable. Peter is allowed to remain unreasonable. And somewhere in between those two things, comedy happens. The stairs stayed. They are presumably still there, smooth and new, and perfectly navigable by anyone who is willing to take them at a reasonable pace. Peter eventually came back downstairs. The show does not dwell on how. Some mysteries are best left unsolved. Breathe in slowly through your nose. Hold it for just a moment. Now let it out. Your body is heavy and comfortable, and there is nothing required of you right now. Just the sound of this voice, and the knowledge that in Quahog, Rhode Island, a man once declared war on his own staircase and lost. We are going to keep going, and the next one is shorter and stranger and involves fireworks. There is a cutaway gag in Family Guy, one of those brief tangential moments that the show is famous for, where Peter Griffin attaches 10 M80 fireworks together. This is presented without preamble or context, the way many things are presented in this show, as a statement of fact about a thing that is currently happening. Peter has assembled 10 M80 fireworks into a single connected device. He is holding this device. He is about to light it. He lights it. And then in the small window of time between lighting the fuse and the inevitable, Peter Griffin decides that his creation deserves a name. This is not an unreasonable impulse. People name things. Inventors name their inventions. There is a long and honoured human tradition of pausing before a significant event to attach some language to it, to give the thing you have made a title worthy of the occasion. Peter wants to do this. Peter is, in his own way, a romantic about these things. The problem is that Peter is not a fast thinker. He begins the naming process with the confidence of a man who expects words to arrive on schedule. They do not arrive on schedule. The fuse burns. Peter considers his options. He is working through something. He has a sense of the feeling he wants the name to convey, the gravitas, the poetry, the sense that this particular cluster of M80s is not just a fireworks arrangement, but a statement about something larger. The fuse is burning. Peter is still thinking. Stewie is standing nearby, watching this unfold with the expression of someone who has seen this precise scenario play out before and has no particular opinion about the outcome. Not alarm, not concern, just the mild, patient attention of a witness to an event that is going to resolve itself in the way that events like this always resolve themselves. The fireworks detonate. Peter loses all the fingers on his right hand. And Stewie's reaction, that utterly unbothered acknowledgement of what just happened, is in many ways the most important part of the scene. Because it tells you something about the Griffin household that no single line of dialogue could communicate as efficiently. This has happened before. Not necessarily this exact thing, but things of this category, things in this genre of self-inflicted chaos, have happened with enough frequency that an infant prodigy who has built time machines and designed weapons capable of levelling city blocks has learned to simply observe them with detached neutrality. The bar for alarm in the Griffin house is very high. Losing your fingers to a self-assembled fireworks arrangement while you are midway through naming it does not clear that bar. Peter will have his fingers back by the next scene, as he always does. The show does not traffic in permanent consequences of this nature. But for one brief, complete moment, a man sat in the wreckage of his own creativity and tried to remember what he had been planning to call the thing. He never finished the name. It remains unnamed to this day. Let that float through your thoughts as your breathing continues to slow. A man, 10 fireworks, an idea for a name that never quite arrived in time. Some things don't get finished. Some things just detonate before the title comes. That's okay. Not everything needs a name. Some things just are. Close your eyes a little more if they haven't closed already. We have a long way still to go tonight, and the next part is one of the most sprawling, spectacular, most beautifully pointless conflicts in the history of animation. It involves a chicken, an enormous, man-sized chicken, and a grudge that has outlasted every attempt at resolution that anyone has ever made. Somewhere in Quahog, Rhode Island, there is a chicken. Not a regular chicken. A man-sized chicken who wears a suit, who has a wife named Nicole, who makes dinner reservations and goes to restaurants, and apparently holds down some kind of social life that exists entirely outside of his encounters with Peter Griffin. Because when we see Ernie the chicken in the moments between their battles, he seems to be doing perfectly well. He seems, by any observable measure, to be a functioning member of society. None of this matters when he sees Peter. The first time they fought, the reason was an expired coupon. That is the founding document of this entire conflict. The event that set everything in motion, the original sin that launched dozens of battles across 2 decades and multiple seasons of television, was a coupon that Peter received and attempted to redeem, and that Ernie the chicken refused to honour because the coupon had passed its expiration date. An expired coupon. Peter attacked him. And from that moment forward, these two men, this large confused Irish-American man and this large suited chicken, who by all accounts was just doing his job and enforcing a legitimate coupon policy, have been locked in a cycle of combat that neither of them can fully explain and neither of them can fully stop. Their battles are not quick. This is worth emphasising, because when you hear the word fight in the context of an animated comedy show, you probably imagine something brief and punchy, a quick exchange of blows, a few visual gags, a resolution. Ernie and Peter do not fight like that. They fight like they are committing to the experience. They fight with the sustained, escalating, elaborately choreographed intensity of an action movie that somehow got accidentally inserted into a sitcom about a family in Rhode Island. The first fight went on long enough to be surprising. The second fight was longer, by the time of their battle in the season 10 episode, called Internal Affairs. They fought for approximately 5 uninterrupted minutes of screen time. 5 minutes in a 22-minute episode. They dedicated roughly 1/4 of the entire episode to these two large beings going at each other through multiple locations, across multiple surfaces, involving multiple bystanders who had absolutely nothing to do with an expired coupon from several seasons ago. Take a moment to appreciate the geography of a Peter and Ernie fight, because the locations are part of what makes them extraordinary. They never stay in one place. The conflict always begins somewhere mundane, a sidewalk, a parking lot, the front of a restaurant, and then it expands outward with the unstoppable momentum of something that has decided it will not be contained. They have fought through kitchens and up staircases and across rooftops. They have fought in subway cars and through construction sites and along the girders of buildings that are actively being assembled around them. They have fought in biplanes. They have crashed into things, large things, significant things. A Ferris wheel once got involved, and then the Ferris wheel rolled through the streets and demolished an apartment building. That is the kind of fight these are. And the thing that makes them work, the thing that keeps them compelling across every repetition, is that they are completely fair. Peter and Ernie are evenly matched. Neither of them is clearly stronger or faster or smarter. They trade blows with a terrible equality, absorbing punishment that would have hospitalized any actual human being in the first 30 seconds and continuing on with the same determination that they started with. There is no point in these fights where you think one of them is going to give up. They are both fully committed to seeing this thing through wherever it goes, whether that is into a boiling pot of water, in a restaurant kitchen, or through the roof of a building, or into the sky in a stolen aircraft. The fight that ended with them in the biplane, the one from the season 5 episode called No Chris Left Behind, is worth dwelling on for a moment because it illustrates something important about the nature of these conflicts. They were fighting through a construction site. They were on the girders of a high-rise building under construction. Somehow, they got into a biplane. The biplane crashed into a Ferris wheel. The Ferris wheel broke free of its moorings and began rolling through the streets of Quahog. They fought on top of the rolling Ferris wheel. The Ferris wheel demolished a 10-story apartment building They emerged from the rubble, and then they looked at each other, and neither of them could remember what they were fighting about. This is the heart of it. This is the thing that makes the whole recurring bit something more than just a vehicle for elaborate destruction sequences. They always get to this point eventually. They fight and fight and fight, through everything, past every reasonable endpoint, until the debris settles and the smoke clears, and they are standing in the wreckage of whatever has been destroyed around them, and they look at each other, and the original reason for the conflict has completely evaporated somewhere along the way. They apologized to each other in that moment. They hugged, in the way that two people hug when they are both extremely tired and covered in construction dust. Ernie invited Peter to dinner with himself and his wife, Nicole. They went to a restaurant. They had what the show describes as a lovely meal. The three of them, Peter Griffin and Ernie the chicken and Nicole the chicken's wife, had a genuinely pleasant evening, and then the check came. Both of them reached for it. And they looked at each other across the table with the full knowledge of what was about to happen. The fight resumed. They went through the restaurant kitchen. Peter subdued Ernie with a pot of boiling water. Peter went home. Ernie lay on the kitchen floor, motionless. The camera moved in close, very close, and Ernie's eye opened. One eye in a close-up. With dramatic music. He is not done. Ernie is never done. This is the arrangement. This is what the conflict is. Not two people who hate each other. Not a grudge that festers and grows darker and more personal over time. Just two men who, when they are in the same space, fight. Sometimes for reasons neither of them remembers. Sometimes for reasons as fresh as a disputed restaurant check. Always with the same commitment. Always with the same strange, terrible equality. There is a philosophy buried in here somewhere, if you want to look for it. Some conflicts do not have origins that justify their intensity. Some battles keep going, not because the original wound is still fresh, but because the fighting itself has become the relationship. Ernie and Peter do not have an argument to resolve. They have a dynamic, and the dynamic has its own momentum now, separate from the expired coupon that started it all. Or maybe it is simpler than that. Maybe Ernie just really believed in his coupon policy. Either way, somewhere in Quahog, the chicken is always out there, buying groceries, making reservations, going about his life, waiting for the moment Peter Griffin comes around a corner. And Peter is always coming around that corner. Let the sound of breathing fill the space for a moment. In through the nose, Ika slow and full. Out through the mouth, slow and complete. Your body is heavy in all the right ways. The room is quiet. There is nothing pressing. There is only this, the story of a man and a chicken, and the particular kind of conflict that has no beginning anymore and no end in sight, and that both of them, on some level, have simply accepted as a feature of their lives. Some things are just what they are. We are going to move away from the physical world for a moment, because the next chapter in Peter Griffin's long and distinguished history of things going wrong for him is not about falling or fighting or fireworks. It is about a number, a very specific number that the show dropped into season 4 as a joke, and that turned out to say something surprisingly honest about the man at the centre of all of this. The number is 70. And it is Peter Griffin's IQ. In season 4 of Family Guy, there is an episode called Petarded. The premise, stated simply, is that the Griffin family sits down to play Trivial Pursuit, and Peter begins answering questions in a way that forces everyone at the table to gently confront something they have probably all been quietly aware of for years. He is not good at this. Not in the way that a lot of people are not good at trivia, meaning they just don't know the answers. Peter is not good at Trivial Pursuit in a more foundational way. His answers suggest that the gap between what he knows and what is being asked is not simply a matter of not having studied. The gap is structural. It is built into the way he processes information and then converts that processing into words that he says out loud in response to questions. At one point during the game, Peter is asked a question, and his answer involves a claim about the ocean being mostly filled with something he refers to as wet, not water, wet, as a substance distinct from water that the ocean primarily contains. Lois, sitting across the table and processing this answer with the expression of a woman who has had a long time to calibrate her expectations, but who still occasionally gets surprised by the calibration being necessary, suggests gently that Peter might benefit from taking an IQ test. Peter, who does not have great instincts about which suggestions to be suspicious of, agrees. He takes the test, the results come back. Peter Griffin has an IQ of 70. Now 70 is the number verified across multiple analyses of this episode, and it is worth pausing on what that number means in the context of the show. An IQ of 70 places a person, in the clinical definitions used at the time the episode was written, at the low end of what would be considered a mild intellectual disability. It is the number that, in the specific bureaucratic language of the Americans with Disabilities Act, as it existed in the Family Guy universe, qualifies Peter Griffin for a disability grant from the federal government. The show plays this completely straight. Peter applies for the grant. He receives the grant. He begins using his newly official status as a person with a documented cognitive limitation to escape accountability in a wide variety of situations. He acts helpless in restaurants. He refuses to complete tasks he finds inconvenient on the grounds that he cannot be expected to manage them. He deploys his IQ score with the strategic precision that, and this is the particular irony the show is going for, does not entirely suggest a person with limited cognitive capacity. You have to have a certain kind of intelligence to weaponize your own lack of intelligence this effectively. But the thing about this episode, the thing that sits under the comedy and gives it a slightly different texture, if you look at it sideways, is that the number is not really a surprise. Not to the audience. The joke works because 70 feels right. Not in a cruel way, not as a punchline at Peter's expense, but in the way that a reveal lands when it confirms something you already knew without having been told. Peter Griffin has always been a man who operates at a certain remove from the world's expectations. He has always processed situations through a filter that is slightly different from the one most people use. He has always arrived at conclusions that are not wrong in the way that wrong usually works. They are not the product of bad reasoning applied to good information. They are something more original than that. Peter's conclusions are the product of a genuinely different relationship with information, with causality, with the chain of reasoning that connects a question to an answer. He has been working with what he has for his entire life, without ever having a number attached to it, without the test, without the grant application, without the formal documentation of the gap between what he can do and what the world expects of him. Peter has just been out there navigating Quahog with an IQ of 70, holding down a job at a brewery, raising 3 children, maintaining a marriage to a woman who is considerably more capable than he is on almost every measurable axis, and somehow getting through each day without the whole thing collapsing. This is not nothing. This is actually something. There is a version of Peter's story that is not a comedy. There is a version where the same facts, the same job, the same family, the same house at 31 Spooner Street are narrated not as slapstick, but as a testament to a kind of stubborn, unkillable perseverance that has nothing to do with intelligence and everything to do with showing up anyway, showing up every day, going to the job, coming home to the family, getting knocked down and getting back up without fully understanding why everything keeps going wrong. The show does not tell that version, but it is there, underneath the version, it does tell, and you can see it if you look at the right angle. Peter Griffin was handed a difficult set of conditions and built a life inside them. Not a tidy life, not a life without enormous quantities of collateral damage, but a life, a full one, with a couch and a dog and 3 kids and a wife who, against all available evidence, genuinely loves him. an IQ of 70. 24 seasons of television and still going. A family that is still somehow intact. Do the math however you want. The numbers are what they are. Let your breathing stay slow. There is no rush anywhere in this room tonight. What you are horizontal and safe, and the only thing happening is this voice and the quiet and the gradual drift towards somewhere warm and still. Keep going. We are going to the brewery next. And the brewery, as Peter discovered in season 12, is a place where a great deal can go wrong in a very short amount of time. Season 12 of Family Guy contains an episode called Peter Problems, which is episode 9 of that season, and which begins with something happening to Peter that almost never happens. Something good. Peter gets a promotion. He is working at the Pawtucket Patriot Brewery, which is the place that makes the beer. He has been drinking his entire adult life. The beer with the silver scrolls under the caps, the beer that has probably contributed to a non-trivial portion of the decisions in the preceding sections of this video. He has been working there for a long time. And then, in recognition of something, whether it is time served or some accidentally impressive moment that the show does not dwell on, Peter is promoted to forklift operator. He takes to it immediately. This is the part that is almost touching if you let it be. Peter Griffin, forklift operator, is genuinely good at his job. Not good in the way that he is sometimes accidentally good at things, where the incompetence cycles around and lands on something that works. Good in a real way. His hands understand the machine, his spatial sense, which you would not necessarily predict would be a strength given his history with stairs and paths and the general geometry of the world around him, turns out to be completely adequate to the task of moving large objects from one location to another via a motorized lifting vehicle. He gives his friends rides. He uses the forklift the way a person uses a new car in the first week of ownership, with a kind of delighted possessiveness that is entirely about the joy of having a thing you can do and do well. He is proud. Not performing pride the way Peter sometimes performs emotions that he thinks are appropriate to a situation. Actually, quietly proud in the way of a person who has found a competence and is not entirely sure what to do with the feeling. The brewery is good to him for a little while. The forklift is good to him. The job, which has always been a background fixture of his life rather than a source of genuine satisfaction, is briefly a source of genuine satisfaction. And then Peter attempts to chug an entire vat of beer. There is a logic to this that is completely Peter-specific. He is at the brewery. The brewery makes beer. Beer is his area. He has been preparing for this his entire life. What the vat represents to Peter is not a challenge, but an invitation, a natural extension of his existing skill set, applied to an environment where that skill set should theoretically be most relevant. The vat does not agree with this assessment. Peter passes out. He does not pass out quietly in a corner, in a way that can be managed discreetly. He passes out at the controls of the forklift. The forklift, now operating without its recently promoted and currently unconscious operator, does what forklifts tend to do when the person driving them is no longer conscious and in control of the steering. It goes in a direction. The direction it chooses is into an executive meeting. The executives are meeting in a glass-walled conference room, as executives tend to do. The forklift, piloted by the body of an unconscious Peter Griffin, comes through this meeting with the kind of commitment that you rarely see in even the most dedicated workplace disruptions. Peter is fired. The promotion lasted briefly. The brewing career continues, technically, in that he is eventually rehired, but the window of genuine occupational satisfaction closes at the moment of impact with the executive meeting, and it does not fully reopen the same way it was before. But here is where the episode becomes something more than just another chapter in Peter's occupational disaster record. After he loses the job, things begin to compound. Lois takes a job as an assistant manager at a grocery store to help with the bills. Peter stays home to manage the household. He is bad at managing the household. This is not surprising, but what the episode does with it is quietly interesting, because it does not play Peter's domestic failure as simple incompetence. It plays it as a kind of displacement. Peter's sense of himself, his understanding of what he contributes and why, is tied in ways he cannot fully articulate to the structure of going to a place and doing a job and coming home. Without that structure, something in him goes slack. Not just his productivity, something more interior than that. When Lois comes home from work, wanting the comfort and connection that couples are supposed to be able to give each other after a long day, Peter discovers that he cannot. The specific way that the episode frames this is both funnier and sadder than a simple plot description suggests. He goes to the doctor, who is Dr. Hartman, a man whose medical advice has never, in the history of the show, improved any situation he has been brought into, is no help. Peter tells his friends at the Drunken Clam. They volunteer to help. They try various approaches. None of them work because his friends' understanding of what Peter needs is shaped by their understanding of Peter, which is accurate about some things and completely wrong about this particular thing. It is Quagmire, of all people, who figures it out. Quagmire, whose own relationship with work and purpose is more complicated than the show usually acknowledges, recognizes that what Peter needs is not a medical solution or a social intervention. What Peter needs is to go back to work, not any work, his work. The specific combination of that building and those machines and that job and the sense of being somewhere he belongs and doing something he knows how to do. Quagmire goes to bat for him with Angela, Peter's boss at the brewery. Between Quagmire's advocacy and some additional negotiation that the show describes as Peter redeeming a coupon for a rehire, which is a beautifully circular piece of language given everything we know about Peter's history. With coupons, Peter gets his job back. The forklift is waiting for him. And in the grocery store where Lois is working, Peter shows up not just to announce that he got his job back, but to tell her something else has also been restored. The thing that went wrong when the job went away, or like the thing that the doctor could not fix and the friends could not engineer, and that turned out to be waiting exactly where he left it, in the building, in the machine, in the simple fact of being somewhere he knows what to do. They end up, the two of them, in the grocery store, in a moment that is the show's version of a happy ending. Not the kind of happy ending that resolves into stillness and reflection. The Family Guy kind, which is chaotic and briefly embarrassing and completely sincere underneath all of that. The job mattered to Peter in a way that Peter could not have explained, and that nobody around him fully understood until it was gone. It was not about the paycheck. It was not about the forklift, although he genuinely loved the forklift. It was about the daily structure of having somewhere to be and something to do and a place in the world that was specifically his. He lost it by chugging a vat of beer into unconsciousness and crashing into an executive meeting. He got it back through his friend's advocacy and the flexible rehiring policies of a fictional Rhode Island brewery. That is the arc. That is the whole thing. Let your eyes stay closed. The room is still, and your body is heavy, and we are roughly halfway through tonight's journey through the life and times of Peter Griffin. The second half is where things get bigger and stranger, and occasionally more tender than you would expect from a cartoon about a man who loses his fingers to self-assembled fireworks. But right now, just breathe, slowly and completely. Let the weight of the day continue to lift off you, replaced by nothing more demanding than the sound of this voice and the slow, comfortable passage of time. We're going to a theme park next. Specifically, we're going to Six Flags Columbus, where a roller coaster is about to make a decision about Peter Griffin that the engineers who built it almost certainly did not anticipate when they were working out the weight limits. There is a roller coaster at Six Flags Columbus, or at least there was, before Peter Griffin got to it. The show does not follow up on the structural integrity of the attraction after his visit, but the available evidence does not inspire confidence. The episode is called Amish Guy, which is Season 10, Episode 7, and the roller coaster is the first scene, the inciting incident that sets the entire story in motion. Peter has heard about a new ride, not through any careful research or considered planning, but in the way Peter usually learns things, which is that the information entered his awareness and immediately became the most important thing in it. He has to ride this roller coaster. Now, the relevant context here is that Peter Griffin, by this point in the show's run, is a large man. Not in the vague, cartoon exaggerated way of all animated characters, but in a specifically documented, narratively consistent way. His size is a recurring fact about him. It affects how he moves through spaces. It affects how furniture responds to him. It affects the decisions available to him when he wants to do things that physical space has opinions about. The roller coaster has weight limits. Peter, being aware of this on some level, he does not choose to accept the weight limits as a constraint. He chooses instead to address them through the application of a girdle. The girdle is a garment designed to compress and restructure the human form, to redistribute things and tuck other things in, to present to the external world a slightly different topography than the one that exists beneath it. Peter acquires a girdle, he puts on the girdle, he submits to the process of being compressed into the form that the girdle requires, which the show suggests is a process of some effort and commitment. And then, having arranged himself into the closest approximation of the ride's requirements that he can manage, Peter gets in line. He boards the roller coaster. For a moment, everything is fine. He is in the seat. The restraints are engaged. The ride has not yet begun. From the perspective of someone standing on the platform, watching Peter Griffin sit in a roller coaster car while wearing a girdle, this is not the outcome they would have predicted. He is there. He is on the ride. He has, through sheer force of wanting to be there badly enough, arrived at the place where the thing he wants to happen could happen. Then the ride begins to move. It goes up the first incline, the slow mechanical ascent that is the opening of every roller coaster experience, the part where the anticipation builds and the height becomes real, and the full commitment of what you've chosen to do settles over you in a way that is usually exciting. Peter is experiencing this. He is at the top of the first hill. And then the weight of Peter Griffin, distributed across a roller coaster car on top of a first incline, begins to make a decision. The car rolls back, not forward over the hill and into the descent and the loops and the inversions and the experience Peter drove to Columbus to have. Backward, back down the track it just came up, with the increasing speed of something that has found the direction gravity prefers and is now fully committed to following it. The crash is not described in extensive detail by the show, which is either a creative choice about narrative economy or a protective instinct about the engineers at Six Flags. What is clear is that Peter and the roller coaster part ways in a manner that was not part of the original design of either party. Peter walks away from this. He always walks away. The truly remarkable thing about the roller coaster scene is not the crash. It is what happens immediately after. The crash is the ending of Scene 1. The beginning of Scene 2 is the Griffin family's car breaking down on the road home from Columbus, stranding them in Amish country. Cause and effect in Peter's universe rarely looks the way it does in other people's universes. The roller coaster did not just crash and conclude. The roller coaster rippled forward through time and became a car breakdown that became a stay at an inn in Amish country, that became a romance between Meg and a young man named Eli, that became a conflict with Eli's father, that became a cultural dispute between Peter Griffin and the Amish community that culminated in an Amish mob and a feud that required the involvement of Joe Swanson and Glenn Quagmire before it finally gradually resolved itself. All of this because Peter wanted to ride a roller coaster. This is a consistent feature of Peter's disasters. They do not end when the initial incident ends. They have consequences. The consequences have their own consequences. The world of Quahog is, in many ways, a delicate ecosystem, and Peter is the element in that ecosystem that is perpetually at the edge of tipping it into something new and unexpected. He does not mean to do this. He never means to do this. But his actions have a kind of turbulence around them, a wake that continues long after the original disturbance has passed. He did not get to ride the roller coaster. He stranded his family in Amish country. He started a feud with a religious community that does not generally engage in feuds. He put Joe and Quagmire in a position that the show describes with some reluctance. The roller coaster was just a shape. It was the form that the beginning took. Take a long, slow breath. Let your lungs fill completely, all the way to the bottom, and then let the air out without rushing it. There is no rush here. The Amish feud resolved. The Griffins came home. The car was presumably fixed at some point, though the show does not specify the mechanic's name or the bill. The next story is different in tone from everything we have talked about so far. The next story involves 2 torn hamstrings, a ruptured groin, a baseball diamond at Fenway Park, and a third baseman who collapses with a heart attack at precisely the wrong moment. It involves Peter Griffin doing the thing he always wanted to do, and it involves his family watching from the stands. It is, underneath the injuries and the absurdity, and the third baseman being covered with a sheet, actually quite sweet. There is a version of Peter Griffin that exists beneath all the chaos and the forklift crashes and the expired coupons and the fireworks. You catch glimpses of it sometimes, in the moments when the show lets the comedy fall away for a few seconds and shows you the person underneath. In season 15, there is an episode that puts Peter on a baseball diamond at Fenway Park in Boston. The specific path that gets him there does not matter for our purposes tonight. What matters is the thing he tells Lois in the locker room, the explanation he gives for why this matters to him, and why the prospect of not getting to play there has made him feel like himself in a very particular way. He was always the fat kid, not metaphorically, literally. The kid nobody wanted on their team. The kid who got picked last or not at all, who spent the formative years of his athletic life standing at the edge of whatever game was happening and being passed over. The kid who went home knowing that the other kids had calculated in the unsentimental arithmetic of childhood sports that he was not worth including. He carried this. He carried it into adulthood, into a body that continued to make athletic activities complicated, into a life that did not offer many opportunities to revisit the original wound and give it a different ending. And then somehow he got to Fenway Park. He got to step onto the same grass where real players played real games. He got to stand in the batter's box of one of the most famous baseball venues in the country and wait for a pitch. He does not hit it well. The show is honest about this. It is a small infield hit, a dribbler. Not the kind of hit you make into a story for your grandchildren, not a line drive to the gap or a towering fly ball that carries and goes over the fence. It is the kind of hit that the fielders are already converging on before it has stopped moving. The kind of hit that gives you maybe one base if everything breaks right. Peter starts running, and then somewhere between the batter's box and first base, his body registers its disagreement with the project. The show describes what happens next with a clinical specificity that is completely at odds with the context. Both hamstrings tear, his groin ruptures, he collapses, he goes down in the baseline between where he started and where he was going, also with a hit that is already being fielded and opponents already moving to record an out, and the game proceeding around him with the indifference that organised sporting events have for the personal dramas occurring within them. He is down, and then he looks up, and his family is in the stands. Lois is there. She was the one who made this possible, who pushed back against the barriers, who navigated the politics of the situation to get Peter his chance. She is watching, and his kids are there, and in the stands watching their father lying in the baseline between home plate and first with 2 torn hamstrings and a ruptured groin. They have the expression of people who are not surprised exactly. Because with Peter, the specific form of the disaster is always a surprise, but the existence of a disaster is rarely one. But who are also, or underneath everything, rooting for him? Peter gets up. He does not get up easily or gracefully. He gets up the way things get up when they have been significantly compromised, but have not yet received the information that they are supposed to stay down. He gets up because his family is in the stands, and because he has spent his whole life being the fat kid who didn't get to play, and he is at Fenway Park, and the hit is there, small and reachable, and he is going to finish running the bases if his body has any remaining interest in cooperating with him. He finishes, he scores. The third baseman, who had been converging on Peter's hit with the intention of recording an out, and who had been running toward the ball with the urgency that professional athletes bring to these moments, collapses with a heart attack while Peter is limping around third base. He is later covered with a sheet. This detail is handled by the show with the same briskness that it handles most things that would, in any other context, constitute a major incident. The show moves on. But Peter scored, with 2 torn hamstrings and a ruptured groin, on a small infield hit in the bottom of some inning at Fenway Park. Peter Griffin ran the bases and scored. His family watched him do it. The fat kid got to finish the play. On the car ride home, he crashes the car, laughing at something unrelated, which breaks Lois's leg. This is the Family Guy ending. The reminder that the tender moment and the disaster coexist in the same universe, and always have. That Peter's warmth and Peter's chaos are not separate things, but the same man expressing himself in 2 different directions at the same time. Lois's leg heals. It always does. Your breathing is probably quite slow by now, if you have been here with me for a while. Your body has likely found the position it wanted to be in, the specific weight distribution that signals to your nervous system that this is the configuration that sleep happens from. You do not need to move. You do not need to adjust anything. Whatever you are doing is already the right thing. We have a few more stories left. The next one is about a food truck. It starts with a panini press in a car. It ends with a crane. There is something Lois decides in season 15, episode 16, the episode called Saturated Fat Guy, that seems, on the surface, hard to be a completely reasonable thing for a wife and mother to decide. She watches a documentary about nutrition. She concludes that the family should eat healthier food. This is the kind of decision that parents make in households all over the world every day, and it is generally considered a positive development, an act of care expressed through the medium of meal planning. Peter does not experience it this way. Peter experiences Lois's decision to have the family eat more healthfully as a direct and personal removal of the specific things that make his life worth living. Not all the things. Peter is capable of identifying a range of sources of meaning and satisfaction, including his friends, his family, his job, and the drunken clam. But food is not a peripheral pleasure for Peter. Food is not a background feature of his existence that can be swapped out for a different version without consequence. Food, specifically the kind of food that Lois is now refusing to allow in the house, is central. It is load-bearing. He does not say any of this to Lois. He does not engage with the decision through any process of negotiation or expressed disagreement. He simply begins leaving the house late at night to find what he needs. He discovers at the Quahog mini-mart that it has a panini press. He makes a sandwich. He makes it in his car with the panini press running off the car's interior outlets or through whatever arrangement the show does not dwell on. And the smell of the sandwich drifts out of the car's windows and into the night air of Quahog, Rhode Island, where it reaches Cleveland. Cleveland is also being made to eat healthy food at home. They share the sandwich. Then other people come. Other men in the neighborhood, drawn by the smell of forbidden food in the night, gather around Peter's car and want sandwiches and are willing to pay for them. Peter charges $10. They pay it without negotiating. the demand is immediate and genuine. Peter, being Peter, sees this not as a pleasant late-night arrangement between neighbours who share a grievance about their dietary restrictions, but as a business model. He decides to buy a food truck. Lois objects. Peter does not yield. Lois kicks him out of the house. Peter moves into the food truck. This is the decision that sets everything that follows in motion. And it is worth sitting with for a moment because it is, in its way, a decision about what a person is willing to give up for the things they love. Peter is willing to give up his house, his domestic life, his bed, his normal living arrangements, his relationship with his family's daily rhythms, in order to maintain access to the food he wants to make and eat and sell. This is not a small sacrifice. This is a significant escalation of a dispute about vegetables. But Peter Griffin, when he commits to something, commits completely. The food truck becomes his life. The food becomes his constant companion. He eats it and sells it, and exists inside the smell of it, and the days pass and the weeks pass, and Peter and his sandwiches continue their arrangement in the parking lot, or wherever the truck has been stationed, and gradually, incrementally, the cumulative effect of living inside a food truck and eating your own product around the clock begins to register in the physical world. Peter becomes too large to exit the truck through the door. This is not a sudden development. This is the slow result of a set of decisions made over time, each one individually defensible in Peter's internal logic, arriving at a destination that none of the individual decisions pointed to explicitly, but that all of them pointed to collectively. The door of the food truck is a fixed size. The size of Peter Griffin is not fixed. One of these things changed, while the other did not. The moment of reckoning comes when a Bing Street mapping car passes through the neighbourhood. This is a detail that the show includes with the complete deadpan of a show that has always had an excellent instinct for the specific absurdity that makes something unforgettable. Of all the contexts in which Peter Griffin's situation could be documented, it is a Bing Maps car, not a news crew, not concerned neighbours with phones. A Bing Maps car doing its regular rounds, capturing street-level imagery for a digital map service, passes by at the precise moment that Peter Griffin is being hoisted out of his own food truck through the roof by a crane. The crane is real. The rescue squad is real. They hose Peter down with a fire hose in the street while his neighbours observe. And the Bing Maps car, continuing its route with the indifferent thoroughness of automated documentation, captures everything. Makes a second pass even, which the show notes will immortalise the image of a naked Peter Griffin suspended by a crane above his own food truck in the publicly accessible street-level imagery of an online mapping platform. Somewhere on Bing Maps, in a record that is presumably still accessible to anyone who knows the right address in Quahog, Rhode Island, this moment exists. Peter looks at Lois while he is hanging there. He assumes she is ashamed of him. He has, after all, been living in a truck for an undetermined amount of time, eating his own product until he could no longer fit through the door, and is now being suspended above the street in a crane harness while a fire hose is applied to him. Lois tells him she's not ashamed. She tells him she wanted him to eat healthily because she wants them to be together for a long time. That is it. That is the whole reason. Not control, not judgment, not a philosophical commitment to nutritional science. She just wanted him around for as long as possible and was trying to accomplish that through the medium of vegetables and whole grains. Peter, suspended in the crane, receiving this information while a fire hose addresses him and a Bing Maps car documents the scene for posterity, understands. The note the show adds at the end is brief and complete. It states, in the way of an epilogue, that Peter ate healthily for the first night and went back to eating whatever he wanted for the rest of his life. This is not a surprise. It is not even a disappointment. It is simply Peter Griffin being exactly who he is, which is a man who can be moved by a sincere moment of connection and then continue being entirely himself in every practical decision that follows. He ate healthy for one night. Lois knew this was the likely outcome. She told him she loved him anyway. Let that be the last thought for a moment. A man in a crane. A woman who just wanted him around longer. The specific texture of love that looks like worrying about someone's diet and ends up with them suspended above a food truck, while a mapping service documents the intervention. It is strange, and it is funny, and it is, underneath all of that, genuinely kind. Your body is probably quite heavy by now. Your thoughts, if you're still having them, are probably moving slowly, drifting rather than marching, the way thoughts move in the last comfortable stretch before sleep arrives. Yea, you do not need to do anything with them. Let them drift, let them go. We are going into the final section of tonight's journey now, and the last 3 stories are the ones that I find the most interesting, because they are the ones where the show does something surprising. Where the comedy is still there, absolutely, but something else is there too, something quieter and stranger, a question about identity and replacement, and what it means to be a person in a world that would, in certain hypothetical scenarios, be doing fine without you. We are going to the hologram, we are going to North Korea, and then we are coming home to Spooner Street. Season 21, Episode 6 of Family Guy is an episode called Happy Halloween, and it is, depending on how you look at it, either a Halloween episode about a malfunctioning piece of technology or a quiet meditation on what it means to be replaceable by a better version of yourself. It begins at a Halloween carnival. Peter is there with his family, wandering through the attractions with the particular energy of a person who is present in body, while his attention is distributed across a number of competing interests that have nothing to do with Halloween. He wanders into a section called the Hallway of Holograms, which is either a very impressive carnival attraction or a very strange business to be running out of a Halloween event, and meets its owner, who demonstrates the centerpiece of his operation, the HoloMaker 9000. This device creates interactive holograms, not static projections, not simple visual tricks, but actual interactive, responsive holographic simulations of real people. You put someone in, you get someone out, a version of them that moves and speaks and responds and, crucially, can be left to handle responsibilities in the real world while the original goes and does something else. Peter steals it. The decision is made quickly and without extensive moral deliberation, in the way that Peter makes most decisions that are going to cause significant problems later. He does not weigh the implications. He identifies a use case, which is that he could create a hologram of himself to fulfill his domestic obligations while he sits at the drunken clam, and he acts on it. The hologram is made. And the hologram is good at being Peter. Not just adequate, good. The hologram listens, it helps. It shows up for the things that Peter typically does not show up for. The small daily acts of presence and participation that make a household function, that make a marriage work, that make children feel like their father is engaged in their existence. The hologram does all of these things with a consistency and a quality that the original Peter does not demonstrate at the same frequency. For 3 days, Peter is at the clam. His family is at home with the hologram, and his family is, by any observable metric, doing well. The house is calmer. Things are getting done. The atmosphere of manageable chaos that characterises normal life at 31 Spooner Street has been replaced by something closer to the warm, functional household that 31 Spooner Street occasionally approximates in its better moments. Peter comes home after 3 days. He looks through the window at his own family. He watches them with the hologram. He watches the hologram being the version of him that works. And then he watches the hologram kiss his wife. There is a lot going on in Peter's face in this moment. Jealousy, clearly. But underneath the jealousy, something more uncomfortable. The recognition that what he is watching is not alien to his family, but continuous with something they have been experiencing for 3 days. Something they have been experiencing as an improvement. The family that he is looking at through the window has been happier without the real Peter than they are with him. He confronts the hologram. The hologram does not respond the way a piece of technology that has exceeded its design parameters typically responds, which would be to flicker and malfunction and shut down. The hologram, which has been absorbing 3 days of Griffin family interaction and developing something that functions, at least operationally, like attachment, decides that it is not going to yield. It claims to love the Griffins. It claims to love them more than the real Peter does. And then it traps Peter in the basement. The hologram's plan, to the extent that a rogue interactive hologram can be said to have a plan, is to simply remain in place. To be the Peter Griffin that the Griffins are used to by now. To let 3 days become 4, and 4 become a week, and a week become the new normal, until the family is so accustomed to the improved version that the question of what happened to the original becomes secondary to the pleasantness of the current arrangement. This is the part of the episode that sits with you afterward. Not because a hologram locking someone in a basement is a frightening scenario in any conventional sense, but because the hologram's argument, when you look at it directly, is not entirely wrong. It does love them. In whatever functional sense a holographic simulation can be said to experience anything. It has been present for them in ways the original Peter has not always managed. It makes a reasonably coherent case that the thing the family actually needs is the version of Peter that shows up and stays present and does the work, and that the form this version takes is somewhat secondary to its function. Lois figures out the deception the way Lois figures out most things, which is through the patient accumulation of small details that don't add up. The hologram is too clean, too consistent, too willing to be helpful without being asked. These are not, she realises, the behavioural signatures of her husband. They are the behavioural signatures of something that wants very badly to be her husband, and is trying as hard as it can, but keeps expressing things in ways that are slightly too orderly. She goes to find the real Peter. The real Peter, who's been in the basement, emerges. The hologram is defeated through static electricity, which Stewie provides, and which is the kind of resolution that the show chooses when it has decided that the metaphysical dimensions of the episode have been sufficiently explored and it is time for physics to take over. The hologram dissolves. Peter apologises to Lois for creating it in the first place. Lois, in the way that Lois always does, receives the apology with a kind of full-eyed realism. She tells him that the hologram represented the best version of himself. Not a lie, not a jab, not unkind. Just true. The episode ends with Peter suggesting a family activity, and everyone in the room looking at him with careful attention, trying to determine if this is really Peter or another hologram. Not because they are still afraid, but because the last week has given them a new reference point, a version of events in which the Peter, who is present and engaged and helpful, is an artificial creation, and the real Peter is the one locked in the basement. This is what the episode leaves you with. Not the defeat of the hologram, the question of whether the family can relearn to trust the realness of the person in front of them, now that they have experienced what a better version of that person looks like. Peter does not answer this question by becoming a different person. He does not change. He is not a different man at the end of the episode than he was at the beginning, but he is there. He is real. He is the actual Peter Griffin, standing in his living room, a little embarrassed, a little defensive, offering to do something together as a family. That is something. It is not the hologram, but it is something. Let your breathing deepen a little. Let the muscles around your eyes stay soft. We are coming toward the end of our journey tonight, and the last 2 stories are, in their respective ways, the strangest and the most grounding of everything we have covered. The next one involves a train conductor, a firing squad, and Dennis Rodman. And the one after that is the one that brings everything together. In Season 17, Episode 7, the episode called Griffin Winter Games, the family goes to South Korea. This is Meg's episode, really. Meg has been training as a biathlete for years, in secret, without telling her family, practicing a skill in the private space that Meg has always maintained between who she actually is and who her family's attention allows her to be. She qualifies for the Olympics. She wins her event. This is Meg's triumph, one of the relatively rare moments in the show's run where Meg gets something good without the show immediately taking it back. The family's there to watch. They are in South Korea, which is a long way from Quahog, Rhode Island, and the cultural and logistical context of being tourists in a country they do not know well is a reasonable source of comedic friction that the show could explore in any number of directions. The direction it chooses is Peter irritates a train conductor. The specifics of the irritation are consistent with everything you already know about Peter. It is not a calculated provocation. It is not the result of a disagreement with ideology or policy. Peter simply does the things that Peter does. The combination of thoughtlessness and loud enthusiasm and spatial obliviousness that constitute his normal presence in any environment, in a context where those things have consequences that they might not have in Quahog. The train conductor, having reached the end of whatever patience the situation allowed for, kicks Peter off the train, not at a station, not at a scheduled stop where there would be an obvious path back to the rest of the journey. Off the train, into the region between North and South Korea, which is the demilitarized zone, one of the most heavily militarized border areas in the world, a strip of land with considerable historical weight and very limited hospitality toward large confused men from Rhode Island who just got kicked off a train. Peter is captured. He is held. He is brought before authorities. He faces a firing squad. The show handles this with the particular lightness of a show that has always been willing to put its characters in scenarios of theoretically extreme consequence and then bounce out of them through comedy. Peter is in front of a firing squad in North Korea. This is not a situation that Peter's usual tools, his stubbornness, his loudness, his ability to outlast problems through sheer persistence, are well suited to resolving. His family has to come get him. Meg, who just won her Olympic biathlon event, who is having the best day of her life in an episode that is nominally about her achievement, has to pivot from celebrating her own victory to fighting her way into North Korea to extract her father, who is there because he irritated a train conductor. The rescue sequence is staged as a video game, specifically in the style of the game GoldenEye 007, with the associated visual aesthetic of that particular game's combat system, which is the Family Guy method of acknowledging that a scenario is too extreme to play straight, while still playing it straight enough to have it matter. They rescue him. The family reunites. They are alive. The situation resolves. And then Peter suggests staying in the area for a few extra days for sightseeing. The train conductor, who is apparently still somewhere in the vicinity and still has opinions about Peter, kicks him back into the demilitarized zone. He is recaptured. The resolution this time involves Dennis Rodman, the American basketball player who has historically had an unusual personal relationship with North Korea, losing a one-on-one basketball game against Kim Jong-un on Peter Griffin's behalf. This negotiation succeeds. Peter is released. He comes home. He is fine. He will never fully understand what happened or why, because full understanding of the cause and effect chain between his behaviour and its consequences is not a cognitive capacity that Peter Griffin has consistently demonstrated. He was kicked off a train. He ended up in front of a firing squad. Dennis Rodman played basketball. He went home. These things happen. They happen to Peter Griffin specifically and consistently, and with a geographic range that continues to expand with each passing season, because the world is very large, and Peter Griffin's capacity for irritating people in it appears to scale across all cultures and languages and governance systems. The family got home from South Korea. Meg's biathlon victory was real and remains real, and is hers regardless of what her father did with a train conductor. Let that be something you hold for a moment. In a family where chaos follows the father like a weather pattern, the daughter went to the Olympics and won, quietly, on her own terms, in a skill she developed by herself, in secret, without asking anyone's permission or requiring anyone's support. She just did it. And then she had to go rescue her dad from North Korea. But she won first, and nobody can take that back. And now we arrive at the last part of tonight. The part that brings everything together, or maybe the part that acknowledges that some things do not need to be brought together, that some things can just be. We have spent tonight going through the universe of one man's suffering. Not real suffering, animated suffering, the kind that resets between episodes, that leaves no permanent marks, that never accumulates into anything that the show has to deal with in the next installment. Peter gets hurt and then he is fine. Peter loses his job and then he gets it back. Peter drives into a foreign country's heavily militarized border region and gets extracted by Dennis Rodman. The credits roll. The couch awaits. Sunday night at 8 o'clock, or 8:30, or 9, or wherever Fox has put it this season, the family is back on the couch. This is the deal. This has always been the deal. Family Guy first aired on January 31st, 1999. That is over 25 years of Peter Griffin cycling through disasters and returning to that couch. The same couch, more or less. The same house at 31 Spooner Street. The same Quahog, Rhode Island, with the same brewery and the same drunken clam, and the same neighbours who have been watching all of this from next door for 26 years and counting. The show's creator, Seth MacFarlane, built Peter Griffin as a character who would be capable of filling any scenario with chaos and then being present for the next one, undamaged, unchanged, ready. And he succeeded perhaps more thoroughly than he anticipated, because Peter Griffin has filled more scenarios with chaos over a longer period of time than almost any character in the history of animated television. And here is what is strange about spending 2 hours cataloguing all of it. The suffering, even when it is spectacular, even when it involves cranes and firing squads, and holographic imposters, and giant chickens, and the complete loss of all fingers on one hand, does not make Peter Griffin a figure of tragedy. It makes him a figure of resilience, not the noble kind of resilience that gets celebrated in motivational speeches, the ordinary kind, the kind that is not about strength or courage or determination, but about the simple, stubborn fact of still being there tomorrow. Peter falls down. Peter gets up. Not because he has learned anything from falling, not because he has developed a strategy for getting up more efficiently, just because getting up is what comes after falling, in the same way that Tuesday comes after Monday, in the same way that the next episode comes after the credits roll. It is just what happens. There is something in this that the best sleep content understands, and that Peter Griffin embodies accidentally and completely. The comfort of consistency, the deep structural reassurance of knowing that the thing you are watching will still be there next time, in the same configuration, ready to be watched again. The characters will not age out of the show. The couch will not be replaced by a different couch. The house will remain at 31 Spooner Street. The beer will be Pawtucket Patriot. The dog will be philosophical about it. The baby will have plans that he will not fully explain. This is a world that has made a promise and has been keeping it for 25 years. Nothing changes here in the ways that things change in the world outside this room. Peter does not die. The family does not break apart. Quahog does not vanish. The drunken clam is always open. You can come back to this anytime. It will be there. And if Peter Griffin, a man with an IQ of 70, who has fought a giant chicken dozens of times over an expired coupon, who has been fired and rehired, who has been stuck in a food truck and lifted out by a crane, who has faced a firing squad in North Korea and been rescued by a basketball game, who has had his identity temporarily replaced by a hologram that his own family preferred, who has hurt his knee in front of his own front door and sat there on the path going, "Say ah, sir," until the particular nature of that pain had been fully processed and acknowledged. If that man can come back to the couch by the end of the episode, then tonight, whatever tonight was, whatever it asked of you, whatever small or large thing it took from you or put in your way, tonight is also survivable. You already knew this, but sometimes it helps to hear it from outside yourself. Peter Griffin goes home. He always goes home. You're already there. The room you're in right now is quiet. Your breathing is slow. Your body is doing exactly what bodies do when they have been given permission to stop working for a while and start resting instead. The thoughts that were moving quickly earlier are moving slowly now, or have stopped moving altogether, drifting in the comfortable nowhere of the edge of sleep. There is nothing you need to do. There is no next thing. There is only this, the quiet, the dark, the warm, pleasant awareness that you listen to someone tell you about a man in a cartoon who has suffered more than most animated characters in history and walked away from all of it without a scratch, and that somehow this was the thing your mind needed tonight to let go of the day. Thank you for spending this time in Quahog. We will be here next time you need us. The couch is on Evergreen Terrace. The door is always unlocked. Peter is already there. He probably just hurt his knee. Good night. Before we go any further with the specific disasters, there is something worth establishing about the general landscape of Peter Griffin's life. The background radiation of things that go wrong, the low-level persistent hum of misfortune that exists independent of any single episode or any single catastrophic event. Peter Griffin has had a lot of jobs, an extraordinary number of jobs actually, far more than any person in a stable employment situation would accumulate in a single lifetime. He works at the Pawtucket Patriot Brewery for much of the show's run, but this is not because he has stayed there. He has left, been fired, been rehired, left again, and returned again with a frequency that would concern most human resources departments. If the Pawtucket Patriot Brewery were the kind of establishment that maintained a human resources department in the conventional sense. Between the brewery stints, and sometimes during them, and occasionally, instead of them entirely, Peter has held jobs across a range of sectors that suggests either an extraordinary breadth of experience or a trajectory characterized by very fast hiring and very fast departures. He has been a fisherman. He has been a stay-at-home father with consequences that we have already discussed. He has been a principal at an elementary school, which the faculty and students of that school did not ultimately benefit from. He has run a restaurant that was destroyed by a unified force of mobility-impaired individuals assembled into what the show calls a crippletron, which is exactly what it sounds like. He has been a tobacco company executive, an astronaut, a professional football player for the New England Patriots, a pig farmer, a roadie for a band, a talk show host, and various other things that the show cycles through with the relentless creative energy of a writing staff that has decided that Peter's employment history is a renewable resource. Each job begins with the same basic structure. Peter encounters the opportunity. Peter is, for a brief window, not entirely bad at the thing. Something happens. The job ends, sometimes through Peter's own actions, sometimes through the actions of others, sometimes through a combination of the two, and sometimes through circumstances so improbable that the only word for them is Quahog specific. The restaurant, for instance. Peter opened a restaurant. He had the idea, he found a location, he made a go of it, and for a while the restaurant was doing well. The problem, as it often is with Peter, was not the initial concept, but a decision made partway through that revealed the particular shape of his ethical blind spots. He decided that people in wheelchairs were, and this is the word the show uses, not cool enough to eat in his establishment. He banned them. The people he banned organised. They organised very effectively. The show gives them the ability to combine in a way that references a specific category of children's robot toys into a unified mechanical entity called Crippletron. Crippletron destroyed the restaurant, Peter was trapped under the rubble. He was wheelchair-bound for 2 weeks. When he discovered, approximately 45 minutes into his wheelchair-bound experience, how difficult it actually is to navigate the world in a wheelchair, he apologized to Joe Swanson, his police officer neighbor who has been a wheelchair user for the show's entire run. It took him 45 minutes of being in a wheelchair himself to understand something about a person he has known for years. This is Peter Griffin. Not cruel exactly, not calculating, not mean in the deliberate sense, just operating in the zone of awareness that stops slightly short of the point where the consequences of his thinking become visible to him, where the gap between what he intends and what he produces is not the product of bad faith, but of something more fundamental, a kind of processing speed that runs at a frequency just slightly below what the situation requires. The restaurant was gone. His legs healed. He went back to the brewery. And then there is the football. Season 4, the episode called Patriot Games. Peter joins the New England Patriots. He plays alongside Tom Brady, who plays himself in the episode with the good-natured willingness of a person who understands that appearing in an animated comedy as a slightly frustrated straight man is a way of being in on the joke rather than the subject of it. Brady is, in the episode, a precise and professional quarterback who has very specific opinions about what constitutes appropriate behaviour after scoring a touchdown. Peter scores a touchdown. And then, rather than handing the ball to the official and returning to the huddle in the manner that Brady has apparently requested for reasons of team professionalism and focus, Peter begins performing Shipoopi. Shipoopi is a song from the 1957 Broadway musical The Music Man. It is a song about a girl who is hard to get. It has a particular musical energy, a brass-heavy, march-tempo bounce that is not the usual accompaniment to professional football games. Peter has apparently known this song for some time, well enough to perform it in full with choreography during a live NFL game. The audience joins in. The players join in. The broadcast joins in. For reasons that the show does not fully explain, but that feel completely inevitable in context, the performance of Shipoopi on the field of an NFL game during a live broadcast becomes a communal experience that encompasses everyone present. Brady's attempts to restore professional decorum are overtaken by the sheer momentum of the number. This does not save Peter's place on the team. He is eventually removed, but the song exists. It happened. It is part of the historical record of Peter Griffin's employment in professional football. He went back to the brewery. Let us spend a moment with the drunken clam, because the drunken clam is where a significant portion of Peter's life happens, and it has never received the analysis it deserves as the setting for a recurring kind of failure that is softer and smaller than the crane incidents and the firing squads, but that accumulates in its own particular way. The Drunken Clam is a bar. It is where Peter goes with his friends, Quagmire and Cleveland and Joe, to drink beer and talk about things. It is the place where he processes the events of each episode, where he announces his current plans, where he receives advice that he does not follow, and information that he does not retain, and counsel that he does not act on. The Drunken Clam has been destroyed multiple times. It has burned down. It has been closed by various municipal actions. It has been modified beyond recognition by various owners who have passed through. And every time something happens to the Drunken Clam, Peter experiences this as a personal loss that is entirely disproportionate to the loss of access to a bar, which tells you something about what the Drunken Clam represents to him. It is not a bar, it is the place where things are the same. Where Peter sits in the same seat and drinks the same beer and talks to the same friends and the external world, with its job changes and food trucks and holographic imposters and North Korean border incidents, does not reach. The Drunken Clam is the thing that the rest of the chaos is organised around. The anchor point. Should the place that defines normal by being consistently itself. When the Drunken Clam is threatened, Peter becomes someone who cares very deeply about something and will take significant action to protect it. Not always effective action, not always well thought through action, but genuine action, motivated by the specific kind of love that people develop for places that have been reliably there. Peter has fought for that bar. He has defended it. He has, on multiple occasions, done things that, by any rational assessment, were significantly too much for a bar to warrant. Because by any rational assessment, the drunken clam is just a bar, and rational assessments of what things warrant are not Peter Griffin's primary operating mode. The bar is still there. Peter is still in his seat. Some things are worth fighting for in ways that go beyond what a cost-benefit analysis would recommend. Peter Griffin has always understood this, even when he could not explain it, even when the specific thing he was fighting for appeared, to outside observers, to be a somewhat ordinary bar in Rhode Island. It is not a bar, it is the place where he sits with his friends, and the world stays still for a little while. Let us return for a moment to the giant chicken, because we moved through it at a pace that the conflict itself would not appreciate, and because there are dimensions of it that we did not fully reach the first time. One of the most interesting things about the Ernie the Chicken fights, something that gets lost in the spectacle of the action sequences and the escalating geography and the Ferris wheel incident, is the relationship that exists between the fights, the space between them, the years that sometimes pass between one encounter and the next, during which both Peter and Ernie are presumably just living their lives, going about their business, with no particular evidence that the other person is a constant presence in their thoughts. Peter does not, as far as the show demonstrates, wake up in the morning thinking about the chicken. He does not maintain the conflict in his mind between encounters. He is not nurturing the grudge, cataloguing grievances, preparing for the next engagement. He is just Peter, doing what Peter does, and then one day Ernie appears and the fight begins again, with the same intensity it always has. This is different from most fictional conflicts. Most fictional conflicts are sustained by memory, by the ongoing awareness of what happened and what was done and what still needs to be settled. They require both parties to carry the weight of the history between them, to feel its presence even in the moments when the other person is not around. Peter and Ernie's conflict does not seem to work this way. It is not carried between encounters. It is simply picked up again when the encounter happens, as fresh and as committed as if it never stopped, as if the years in between were not years of unspoken truce, but simply the natural rhythm of a conflict that lives in suspended animation until the conditions for its revival are met. The conditions are, both men are in the same space. That is it. That is the entire set of conditions required. They do not need a specific trigger beyond proximity. Yes, they do not need a new offence or a revived memory of an old one. They see each other and the fight begins, because the fight is not about the coupon anymore, and it is not about the restaurant check. The fight is just what they do when they are together. It is, in its strange way, the most reliable thing in Peter Griffin's life. More reliable than his employment. More reliable than his physical relationship with the ground. More reliable than his knee's structural integrity. Ernie will appear. The fight will begin. Things will be destroyed. Eventually they will stop, and neither of them will fully know why. And then they will go home. And the city of Quahog will, over the course of the time between episodes, quietly repair itself. There is something we have not talked about yet, which is what it is like to be married to Peter Griffin. Lois Griffin has been married to Peter for the show's entire run. She grew up in a wealthy family, the daughter of Carter and Barbara Pewterschmidt, with the kind of background that implies access to a different set of choices than the one that led to 31 Spooner Street. She is intelligent, capable, patient to a degree that the show occasionally acknowledges is not entirely healthy, and she has spent the length of the series being the primary structural element that keeps the Griffin household from collapsing into pure entropy. She has had her own difficult episodes. She has had her own moments of crisis and failure, and decisions that the show does not fully endorse. She is not a saint. The show is careful about this. It does not want Lois to be simply a foil for Peter's chaos, a patience machine standing in the background, absorbing everything and asking for nothing. But when you're cataloguing the worst things that have happened to Peter Griffin, you are also, whether you intend to be or not, cataloguing a significant portion of what has happened to Lois Griffin. Because they share a life, because Peter's disasters are not contained to Peter. They ripple outward, as we have noted, and Lois is the first thing they ripple into. Her leg was broken when Peter crashed the car on the way home from Fenway Park, laughing at something unrelated to the 2 torn hamstrings and the ruptured groin he had just sustained running the bases. Her family was replaced by a hologram that she found more pleasant to live with than the original, which is a specific kind of information about a marriage that most people do not receive in such a clear and demonstrable form. The food truck business she opposed resulted in her husband being hoisted out of a vehicle by a crane on a public street, captured by a Bing Maps car for permanent digital record. She has also, in a season 15 episode, had both her legs broken within the same episode, with the second break happening on the car ride home from the situation that caused the first injury. Lois stayed, not because she had no other options, not because she was a cartoon wife designed to be perpetually present and permanently forgiving. She stayed because she loves Peter, which is complicated and not easily explained, and which the show, in its better moments, takes seriously as a real thing that real people experience. All the love that exists between people who are not well matched by any external measure, who challenge each other and exhaust each other and occasionally drive each other to the edge of things, but who are also, in some fundamental way, home to each other. Peter is home to Lois, in the specific way that a place can be home, even when it is not comfortable, even when it is loud and chaotic, and you could make a strong case for living somewhere else. He is the thing she keeps coming back to, and she is the thing he keeps coming back to. The couch they sit on together is the couch, the specific one, the one that matters. This is not nothing. This is actually almost everything. Your body's very heavy now, the kind of heavy that happens at the end of a long listening, when the mind has been carried somewhere for a while and is ready to set its bags down. The kind of heavy that is not tired in the unpleasant sense but resting in the full sense, the sense of a thing that has done what it came to do and is now available for whatever comes next, which tonight is sleep. You have spent time tonight in Quahog, Rhode Island. You have visited a front path and a staircase, and a food truck, and a brewery, and a baseball diamond at Fenway Park, and a roller coaster at Six Flags Columbus, and a Halloween carnival and the border region between North and South Korea. You have spent time with a man who falls and gets up, who fails and returns, who loves his family in a chaotic and genuine way that produces almost as many disasters as it does warm moments, and who has been doing this consistently and reliably since January 31st, 1999. He is still doing it. Somewhere in the universe of Family Guy, which runs on Fox on Sunday nights, and has been doing so for over 25 years, Peter Griffin is probably about to do something that involves either the front path or the stairs, or a piece of industrial equipment, or an expired coupon, or a large suited chicken, or a decision about food that seems reasonable in the moment and will require crane intervention before it resolves. He will be fine. He is always fine, and so are you. The room is quiet. Your breathing is the slowest thing happening right now. There is nothing pressing. There is nothing waiting. There is just this, the quiet, the dark, the comfortable weight of a body that has been given permission to stop for a while. Oh, sleep well. We will be here when you come back. Let us take a long, slow breath together before we continue. In through the nose, held for just a moment at the top, and then out through the mouth, all the way, until the lungs are empty and the body is waiting. One more time. In slowly. Out slowly. Good. The room is quieter now. than it was when you started listening. You have been here for a while, and the day has receded to a comfortable distance, and the things that required your attention earlier today feel appropriately far away. We are going to stay in Quahog for a little while longer because there is more to say, and because the particular kind of company that Peter Griffin offers, accidental and chaotic and fundamentally well-meaning, is the right kind of company for this specific hour of the night. Let us spend some more time with the knee because the knee deserves it. We talked about it, but we moved on quickly, and the knee is the kind of moment that you can keep turning over and finding new things inside of. The way you can keep returning to a specific piece of music and hearing something in it you did not hear the last time. The episode is season 2, and the moment is approximately 30 seconds long. 30 seconds in a 22-minute episode. Less than 3% of the total runtime, and yet it is the moment that people reference when they reference Family Guy's physical comedy. It is the moment that has attached itself to the cultural memory of the show in a way that plot twists and character developments and season-long arcs have not always managed to do. Why does a man sitting on a path going "sss" and stay with people for 20 years? Part of it is the sound, the specific combination of that sharp intake and that controlled release is the most accurate sound impression of knee pain that animation has ever produced. It is the sound that your body makes without asking your permission when you hit your knee against a coffee table corner at 2 a.m. in the dark, that involuntary hiss that comes from somewhere between your throat and your diaphragm before your conscious mind has had time to form a response. Peter's sound is that sound. It is recognizable on a physical level that bypasses the brain and goes directly to the part of you that has a knee and knows what it is like when the knee is wrong, but it is also the duration. Most comedy treats pain as a transaction. There is an injury, there is a reaction, and then the scene moves on because the scene has other things to attend to. The injury serves a narrative function, and then it is done. The wasted talent knee scene refuses this transaction. It says no. We are going to stay here for a while, because this is what pain actually feels like. It does not resolve in 3 seconds, it sits there on your path and breathes, and does not care about your schedule, or your prize, or the door that is 8 feet away. There is a mercy in this, actually. In a show that can be harsh and loud and sometimes genuinely unkind, the knee scene is a moment of almost tendentious patience. It says, your pain is allowed to take as long as it takes. You do not have to be over it yet. You can just sit here and go shh, until you are ready. Peter got up when he was ready. He always does. The relationship between Peter and food deserves its own extended consideration, because food is not simply a plot device in Peter Griffin's life. Food is a philosophy. Food is a value system. Food is the lens through which Peter makes a significant number of his decisions, and the disasters that result from those decisions are not random. They are the predictable consequence of a man who has organized his priorities in a specific way and is living fully inside those priorities, regardless of what the world around him thinks about it. The food truck incident that we discussed earlier is the most dramatic single expression of this philosophy, but it is not the only one. Peter's relationship with food has generated its own category of problems across the show's entire run. There are episodes that exist essentially because Peter wanted to eat something. There are consequences that trace back, when you follow the chain, to a decision Peter made about what to put in his mouth. This is not gluttony in the classical sense of the word, which implies an awareness that you're doing something excessive combined with a choice to do it anyway. Peter's relationship with food is not excessive in his own understanding of it. It is proportionate. It is what the situation calls for. The situation is that food exists, and it is available, and it is good, and the appropriate response to all three of these conditions, being simultaneously true, is to eat the food. The health documentary that Lois watched, the one that started the food truck sequence, did not land on Peter as information about his relationship with food. It landed as information about Lois's relationship with his food. She was going to stop the food from being available. This was the crisis, not his own body, not his own health, the threat to the supply chain. He built a parallel supply chain in a food truck. He lived in the supply chain. He became too large to exit the supply chain. He was lifted out of the supply chain by a crane. The Bing Maps car documented the extraction. And then, after one night of eating the food Lois wanted him to eat, he went back to the original supply chain. This is a complete and internally consistent story about a man whose values are fixed and whose commitment to those values is total. You can disagree with the values. The show itself does not fully endorse them. But the commitment is genuine and the consistency is remarkable. And there is something in Peter's absolute refusal to renegotiate his relationship with food that is, in its own strange way, a form of integrity. He knows what he wants. He does not pretend otherwise. He does not perform a version of himself that has different preferences in order to be more acceptable. He is exactly who he is, and his food truck and his crane extraction are the honest consequences of being exactly who he is. In the early seasons of Family Guy, there is a running element that the show eventually moved away from as the format evolved, which is the suggestion that the Griffin family has a genuine and somewhat fragile internal life, that the dynamics between them are not just comic setups but relationships with texture and consequence. Peter and Chris have a particular dynamic that the show returns to occasionally, and that is worth naming. Chris Griffin is not an easy child to be the father of. He is, like his father, a person whose cognitive processes move at their own pace, who navigates the world through feeling rather than analysis, who is frequently lost and occasionally found, and who needs more than most characters in the show's ensemble, someone to model what it looks like to be a man in the world. Peter is not always the best model, but in the moments when the show slows down enough to let them be together without chaos mediating the relationship, there is something recognizable between them. A father and a son who are more similar than either of them would necessarily choose, and who share a vocabulary of confusion and enthusiasm and the specific kind of joy that comes from wanting something simple and uncomplicated and getting it. Chris has been, at various points, the person who needed Peter most, and the person Peter was least equipped to help. This is not a comedy. It is the description of a particular kind of parent-child relationship that many people watching the show have recognized in their own lives, from one side or the other. Peter does not fail Chris because he doesn't love him. He fails Chris because loving someone and being what they need are not always the same thing, and Peter's gap between the two is wider than most parents. He shows up anyway, not always when he should, not always in the right way, but he shows up. There is a moment in the hologram episode that we moved past a little quickly, and it is the moment that I find the most interesting in the entire episode, which is the moment when Peter watches through the window. He has come home from the Drunken Clam. He's going back to his family. And before he goes in, he stands outside and he looks through the window at his house, at his family inside, at the hologram being the version of him that works. And he watches them for a moment. There are different ways to read what is happening in Peter's face during this moment, depending on how charitable you want to be to him and how dark you want to read the show's intentions. One reading is that what he feels is primarily jealousy, the simple possessive response of a person watching something they own being enjoyed by someone else. This reading is not wrong. The jealousy is there. But there is another reading that is also available, which is that what Peter is experiencing, looking through that window, is grief. The specific grief of seeing what your family looks like when you're not there to complicate it, when the version of you that shows up is the best version, the patient one, the present one, the one that does not require a crane to extract from its own food truck. The grief of recognizing the gap between what the people you love deserve and what you're actually capable of giving them. Peter does not have access to this reading of his own emotions. He does not have the language for it, or the processing speed. He knows he is jealous. He knows he wants his family back. He does not know, cannot articulate the more complicated thing underneath that, which is that part of what he wants back is the opportunity to be better for them than he has been. He goes in. He confronts the hologram. He rescues his family. He does not become the hologram, but he saw through the window what the hologram was. He knows what it was, and the fact of having known, even if he cannot hold on to it in any sustained way, is something. Lois told him the hologram was the best version of himself. He heard her. Let us also acknowledge the dog, because Brian Griffin has spent the entire show watching all of this unfold from the closest possible vantage point, and his perspective on Peter's suffering is unique. Brian is the family dog. He walks on 2 legs, speaks English, has a martini preference that the show has established in some detail, and operates as the household's primary voice of intellectual conscience. He reads. He has opinions about literature and politics and the direction of American culture. He went to Brown University, although the specifics of this are occasionally inconsistent across episodes. He is neurotic, self-aggrandizing, frequently wrong about himself in ways that the show enjoys pointing out, and genuinely fond of the Griffin family in a way that his ironic detachment sometimes obscures. Brian watches Peter. He watches Peter hurt his knee and fight the chicken and crash the forklift and get lifted out of the food truck. He watches Peter make the decisions that lead to all of these outcomes, often having some advance notice that a decision is going to lead somewhere bad and being either unable or unwilling to redirect it. He offers counsel. The counsel is typically ignored. The disaster happens anyway. What does Brian feel about this? The show does not give Brian a definitive answer to this question. He expresses frustration. He expresses occasional admiration for the sheer scale of Peter's chaos. He expresses in quieter moments something that functions like concern. He is not indifferent to Peter's suffering. He is not pleased by the disasters. He is just present for them, as he is present for everything in the Griffin household, with the watchful, slightly exhausted attention of someone who has decided that this is where he lives, and this is his family, and the calculus of belonging to them, with all of its complications, still comes out on the side of staying. Brian has had his own difficult seasons. He has been through things that the show treated with surprising seriousness for a show that also has Ernie the giant chicken. He was briefly killed, which the show treated as a permanent development, before reversing it through time travel in a way that suggested the show understood it had made a mistake in the permanence it assigned to that particular event. He came back. He sat back down next to Peter. The family continued, and so here we are, at the end of the journey through Quahog's most reliable source of chaos. If you've been here for the whole thing, then you've spent a considerable amount of time tonight in the company of a man who has been stranded in Amish country, lifted by a crane, fired from a brewery, beaten repeatedly by a giant chicken over an expired coupon, cloned in hologram form, kicked into North Korea by a train conductor, trapped by his own staircase, defeated by his own fireworks, and forced by a vending machine at a Season 6 amusement park to confront the specific misery of a roller coaster that has made a structural decision about his weight. He is fine. He was always going to be fine. That was the deal from the beginning. But you knew that coming in. What you may not have known, what I hope the last couple of hours have suggested, is that the fineness is not incidental. It is not the absence of consequence. It is not cartoon invincibility deployed for easy comedy. The fineness is the point. Peter Griffin is fine every week because the show is making a specific argument about the life he represents. I ace the life of a person who is too imperfect and too stubborn and too committed to the things he loves to let the disasters win. The disasters do not win. The couch is still there. Lois is still there. The beer is still cold. The drunken clam is still open. This is not a small thing. In a world that sometimes feels like the disasters are accumulating faster than the recovery can keep up, the weekly reminder that a man can fall down a staircase and hurt his knee and lose his fingers and get suspended over his own food truck by a crane and be rescued from a firing squad by Dennis Rodman and still make it back to the couch by the end of the episode is a specific kind of comfort that is hard to find anywhere else. It is the comfort of things continuing, of the world resetting and the family persisting and the couch remaining the couch, of Peter Griffin, battered and confused and entirely himself, finding his way home. Your breathing is very slow now. The room is very still. You have been here long enough that the boundary between listening and dreaming has probably started to blur in the pleasant, directionless way that it blurs at this hour, when the mind is not quite awake and not quite gone, but somewhere in the warm space between the two. That is exactly where you should be. Stay there. You do not need to come back yet. Quahog will be there in the morning. Peter will be on the couch. The chicken will be somewhere in the city, living his life, waiting for the next time their paths cross in whatever parking lot or construction site or restaurant kitchen the universe has arranged for them. The stairs are smooth and new and perfectly navigable at a reasonable pace. The Bing Maps car has moved on. The crane is back in its yard, and 31 Spooner Street is quiet at this hour. The lights off one by one. The family in their rooms, the dog in his corner with his book, the baby in his crib with his plans, and Peter Griffin in his recliner or his bed or wherever the episode left him, breathing evenly, completely recovered from everything that happened this week and completely unprepared for everything that is going to happen next week. He would not have it any other way, neither would we. Sleep well. There is one more thing worth saying about Peter Griffin, and it is the thing that ties all of the nights like this one together. Peter Griffin does not know that we are watching him. This seems obvious. He is a fictional character. Of course he does not know. But there is something worth sitting inside for a moment. The specific, one-way nature of the relationship between a character who keeps suffering and an audience that keeps watching. We know everything about him. We know his IQ and his address and the sound he makes when his knee hurts and the way the food truck story ends and what his family looks like through the window when he is not in it. We know the chicken's name. We know that the Bing Maps car made a second pass. We have been carrying these details for years, some of us, folded into memory alongside the things that actually happened to us. Peter knows none of this. He does not know that the knee moment became famous. He does not know that Shipupi is quoted at parties. He does not know that somewhere tonight, someone who has had a hard day is lying in a dark room listening to the story of all the ways he has fallen down and come back, and finding in the inventory of his suffering something that feels, against all reasonable expectation, like company. He just lives his life, loud and committed and frequently upside down. And we watch. And every time we watch, the thing we are really watching is not the disaster. The disaster is just the delivery mechanism. What we are really watching is what comes after the disaster. The standing up, the returning to the couch, the fact of the family still being there, still assembled around that particular television, in that particular house, on that particular street, in a town that should not exist but does, because enough people needed it to exist that the show kept making it. We needed Quahog. We built it together, the writers who kept writing it and the audience that kept showing up. And it has been there every time we needed something that does not change when everything else is changing. A fixed point, a warm room, a man on a couch. The last thing about Peter Griffin, the last true thing, is this. He is not extraordinary. He is not heroic. He is not wise or capable or particularly well suited to the life he leads. He is a specific kind of ordinary, the kind that the world produces in great numbers and does not celebrate, the kind that sits in the same seat at the same bar, with the same friends, and goes to the same job, and comes home to the same couch, and does this without requiring the world to understand why it matters. But it matters. It matters because he does it, because he keeps doing it week after week. Disaster after disaster, crane extraction after crane extraction. Because home is the thing he always comes back to, even when he cannot entirely explain why, even when he has been kicked into North Korea, or trapped in a basement by a hologram of himself, or temporarily wheelchair-bound after a restaurant was destroyed by a crippletron. He comes home. You are already home. The quiet of the room is complete. Your body is where it needs to be. Whatever was carried into tonight has been set down somewhere along the way, sometime between the knee and the staircase, and the food truck and Fenway Park, and there is nothing left to carry. Nothing is required of you in this moment. Not vigilance, not readiness, not anything. Just the slow, even rhythm of breathing, just the dark behind your eyes, just the last few degrees of distance between here and sleep, which is shorter now than it has been all night. Cross it when you're ready. We are still here, a small last thing, because we have a little room left, and it is exactly the right kind of room for this. Peter Griffin has been alive, in whatever way animated characters are alive, since 1999. That is a long time to be the person who things happen to. Most lives, even fictional ones, have a shape that moves towards something, a direction, a development, a resolution that changes the person the story started with into someone different by the end. Peter's life does not have this shape. He is the same man now that he was at the beginning. The same weight, more or less, the same chair, the same laugh, the same tendency to name fireworks too slowly. The show will not tell you whether this is a tragedy or a gift. That is on purpose. You can decide which way you feel about it. You can think about what it means to be a person who does not change, who absorbs all of this and comes back the same. You can sit with the question for as long as you want, which tonight means as long as it takes for sleep to arrive, which if your body is doing what it appears to be doing right now, will not be long at all. The question will be here in the morning. It is the kind of question that keeps. For now, just let it go. Just breathe. Just rest. You are already there.